Traditionally, domestic abuse happened behind closed doors, but with women's refuges came a much-needed lifeline for women fleeing violent partners. Recent funding cuts to refuges mean some women have paid a high price and in the worst cases found themselves homeless. Carolyn Sims spoke to those affected by domestic abuse in this moving report.
He'd walk up to us and he'd lift his hands as if he was going to punch us, so I'd go away. And then he'd just walk away. I never knew. And I think that was the worst bit, because I never knew.
Carol was subjected to 5 years of violence at the hands of her partner. The final time he beat her, he was jailed for 18 months.
I thought I was going to die. Last time I seen him, he was standing hours, and I was just held up in the ball. I just wanted to die.
Despite everything she went through, what frightened Carol the most was the thought of losing her home.
That's all I had. And it doesn't seem much, and I know it doesn't seem much, but to me, that was everything.
Carol's housing association took control, installing a safe room, cameras, an intercom system and locks. She was able to live safely at home until she felt ready to move away and start a new life. But thousands of women across the country aren't getting that support. Thousands end up homeless. Too afraid to sleep on the streets, they move from place to place to escape abuse.
A third of women that we surveyed last year had been forced to give up their home, either as a result of economic abuse or having to leave their partner. And from the women we supported in our No Woman Turned Away project, we saw that 1 in 10 were forced to sleep rough. Over half had to sofa surf, including many with their children with them. And sadly, over 1 in 10 were forced to return to a perpetrator because of the difficulties they experienced in finding a refuge or in finding safety.
The housing sector recognises it can have a dramatic impact on improving the situation. Make a Stand, the campaign launched by the Chartered Institute of Housing, asks housing organisations to make 4 key pledges. It is led by President Jim Strang, whose own childhood was blighted by abuse, yet no action was ever taken.
I can remember the nights lying in my bed and my mum getting thrown out the back door in their night clothes, screaming, banging the door to get back in to save us becoming victims. And the neighbours hearing it, listening to it, did nothing. They didn't come out with a blanket nor a cup of tea. But the following day, some of them would say to my ma, "Aye, Mary, we heard it last night." But not once did anybody do anything about it.
Make a Stand is welcomed by the co-founders of the Domestic Abuse Housing Alliance. It was set up in 2014 as a fully accredited framework for tackling domestic abuse.
It's really important that frontline workers are aware of the issue and are therefore reporting it onto the specialist services and working in partnership. Isolation is a part of domestic abuse. That's what people isolate you. So you don't ever have access to anyone. And actually the only person that might ever see you would be the caretaker or the contractor or the gas engineer that comes into your property.
When we talk to victim survivors around the country and they tell us about their experiences of their housing provider, I think that's when we can see that there's been real impact and it's really made a difference to that person's life. But we don't want that to be a postcode lottery. We want every customer who lives in social housing to have the same response, so that it's a standardised, coordinated response to domestic abuse.
And there are calls for much more government action. Funding for women's refuges has been cut drastically, and statistics don't reflect the real numbers of homeless women, the so-called hidden homeless. The government has set targets for reducing rough sleeping. It wants it halved by 2022 and completely eliminated by 2027. But without joined-up strategies for tackling domestic abuse, campaigners warn those targets may never be met. There is a genuine desire within the housing sector to tackle domestic abuse in all its forms, to remove the barriers preventing women from getting help.
What I suffered as a youngster, no one should suffer, yet it's happening every day. We can say enough is enough. And with that one clear voice, we can make that change.